Welcome to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey, a podcast to encourage, educate, and equip you to care for children and youth through adoption, foster, and kinship care. Hosted by an adoptive mom with over 22 years of kinship and adoptive parenting experience. She's on this journey with you. Please welcome Sandra Flach.
I am the Lord, the God of all mankind. Is anything too hard for me? Well, that is Jeremiah 32, verse 27, and I am your host, Sandra Flach. Welcome to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey, where you will be encouraged and supported and equipped for your parenting journey. As a mom of 8 myself, 5 through adoption, including 2 young adult sons, both now in their 20s, who were diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome when they were little. I've parented a couple other kiddos who are probably somewhere on the spectrum, but back then we did not know what we did not know. But either way, I get it. I understand the challenges that we face parenting children with trauma histories who have had prenatal substance exposure. I'm here with resources and support for you. In addition to this podcast, we've got lots of other resources. So I do online and in-person workshops, and one coming up in September I want to tell you about is Wired Differently. It is a 3-hour online workshop for parents, for caregivers, for professionals, for anybody working with children who have come from the adoptive and foster care, kinship care space. I use the Facets neurobehavioral approach, which I am a certified facilitator of, and we focus on the impacts of trauma and also unpack what the impact of prenatal exposure to substances, and especially we zero in a little bit on alcohol, but really how all of the above affects the brain and body. And we look at symptoms, which are those behaviors, right? There are primary, secondary, and tertiary symptoms of brain differences, including FASD, and we explore, we learn about that, we learn about the brain, and we also explore accommodations, how to support an individual whose brain works differently because of trauma, because of exposure, because of these things. And we look at strengths-based strategies as well. So we will fill your toolkit in that 3-hour workshop. So I hope that you will sign up for it. Again, that's Wired Differently. It is going to be offered on September 16th at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Again, it's a 3-hour session. There is a link in the show notes for you to be able to sign up and learn more, get more information easily. So don't delay, do that now so that you can get in on that in September. I'm not offering any online workshops in July or August. I have a very full summer. I'm super excited. We have a wedding for one of our daughters. We've got another daughter in town, and I have a retreat for our support group members. So lots going on. So I'll be diving back into offering online training in September. And I have other places I'm going to be in September that maybe we can connect. I will be at the Christian Alliance for Orphans Summit in Atlanta, Georgia, September 23rd through 25th. I will be doing a coaching room and an FASD, Hope for the FASD Journey meetup session, where we'll meet up in a room that they assign to us, and we can just connect, and I can pray for you, and it would be just great to meet in person. And then from there, literally, I'm flying from Atlanta to Washington, D.C. for the FASD United Affiliates Impact Week. And then in October, I will be in Chicago for the Replanted Conference. So in Chicago, that is October 15th through 17th. I'll be leading 3 breakout sessions. And at both CAFO and Replanted, I will also have an exhibitor booth. I'll have resources and things there. My books will be there. So if you can get out to one of these conferences, come by the table, see me, come to the workshops. I always love to connect with our listeners and just get to meet you in person and have a few words, take a selfie, that kind of thing. If you are interested in having me come to your event, Maybe you're going to be hosting a foster adoption parent retreat, or maybe you want to put together a conference, or maybe you have a support group and you want to Zoom me in for a training where I can do a presentation online for your group. Whatever you need, whatever you would like to do, whatever you're thinking of, reach out to me. My email is in the show notes. Super simple, Sandra Flach at justicefororphansny.org. And I check my own email, so I will get back to you, if you're just interested in having me come or want to talk about some ideas you have, or maybe you have a question about FASD or something we talk about on the podcast, or maybe you have a guest recommendation, or you just want to share what this podcast means to you. I love, like, my favorite emails are when I hear from you, and we get to connect that way. So feel free to email me anytime. Would love to hear from you. Also, let's see, my newest book is my devotional, which is a resource for foster and adoptive moms. It is called Soul Care Saturday, 52 Devotions for Foster and Adoptive Moms. Listen to one of the reviews that I found on Amazon, which I don't know who exactly this person is. I don't think it's, she just signed, her name is Mom to the Nine is how she signed it. So this is what she says, a little bit of what she says, because she said more, but I'm not going to share all of it. Sandra brings us into the word and it washes over us with grace and truth. As an adoptive mom of 9, this book has touched my heart and reminded me God is for me and my family, and He is faithful. So that's just a little bit of what Mom of the Nine writes in her review. So if you are interested in getting a copy of Soul Care Saturday, hop on over to Amazon. You can order it today. And also, if you do enjoy it, like Mom of the Nine did, feel free to hop back on there and leave me a review. I would love that and be so blessed by that. So now to our guest today. We have with us Dr. Mark Andrews. Dr. Andrews is the founder and director of Adoptive Family Resources, Inc. in Noonan, Georgia. He provides training and parent coaching for several foster care and foster to adopt organizations in the Atlanta area, as well as via independent training and coaching referrals throughout Georgia and the U.S. With over 30 years of experience as a child and adolescent therapist, coupled with being an adoptive parent since 1994, Dr. Andrews has unique both worlds perspective on the needs and challenges experienced by adoptive and foster families. Well-versed in trauma-informed and trauma-responsive care, Dr. Andrews is a TBRI practitioner, and through Adoptive Family Resources, Inc., is also a member of the Christian Alliance for Orphans, as well as an affiliate network member with FASD United. We're going to get into all of that. Please welcome to the show, Dr. Mark Andrews. Hi, Mark. Welcome to the show.
It's great to be with you, Sandra. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too. We first connected when you took one of my online FASD workshops,
Right.
which we're going to talk about FASD along the way here a little bit. But I'm excited for our listeners to get to know you. And I want to hear a little bit more of your family's adoption story. I know you're an adoptive dad, and you adopted back in the 1900s as
way back.
Yes, one of my sons he heard my date of birth the other day and he was like, "Oh, you were born in the 1900s?" And I'm like, yes, actually I was. So it wasn't that long ago, 1994, but would you share what led you and your wife to pursue adoption?
Sure, absolutely, Sandra. Thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, way back in the 1990s. And to kind of condense that a little bit, excuse me, we had been married for, Lisa, my wife and I had been married for 13 years. And we did not have kids biologically, and just felt that the Lord was calling us. And I really did. Adoption is what I call a calling of the heart, as you know. And we just felt called by the Lord to adopt. And people ask me periodically, well, why did you adopt internationally? Why did you go to India? Why didn't you adopt a baby, excuse me, from the US? And our only answer was we didn't feel called to do that. It was a calling of the heart. And we felt called to India to adopt at least one older child. And, I'm sure some people kind of thought we were a little bit off our rocker on that. But we were fully supported, thank God, immediate family, church family, that became our village. And so in 1994, way back in ancient history, Lisa and I traveled to Mumbai, India. And oh my gosh, you talk about culture shock. I tell people still it was a total assault on our senses because we had traveled internationally before, but there's no place like India.
Mm.
And so Michael, whose Indian name was Pintu, we adopted Michael through our adoption agency, Holt International, which is really the pioneer in international adoption. Adopted him at age 7 in 1994 and brought Michael home. And, my kids always give me permission to tell these stories. We have this little wild banshee who barely spoke English running around the house and thought, what did we get into here? Not in a negative way, but it was an adjustment. But he's now 39. He turned 39 in June, and he's a former Marine, and we're so proud of that. Once a Marine, always a Marine. And he's gotten his HVAC license, heating and air. He now works for a company here in Noonan, Georgia, that supplies lift trucks to Atlanta Hartsfield Airport here, the largest airport in the world. And we're really proud of him. And he's overcome. I will tell you, he's overcome a lot, and he's overcome a lot through the grace of God. And so we're really proud of him. And he's, both of our kids, Sandra, are what I call my right arm in Adoptive Family Resources, because this is why I do what I do. And I'll share a little bit about that later. We didn't want Michael to be an only child. And so the calling of the heart to India continued. And so in 1999, I actually stayed home with Michael. He was really concerned about Lisa and I both going to India and something happening to us. And of course, I think there's trauma issues involved there. So we worked out a plan where I stayed home with Michael. He and I flew to Pennsylvania to spend 2 weeks with my folks, while Lisa, my wife, her brother, her older brother, and her mother traveled to India.
Wow.
and got Sarah, who had just turned 4 at the time. And we brought Sarah back home. She's now 31. And again, an amazing young woman. She serves on my board. She's my technical wizard. Sarah's got her bachelor's in early childhood ed and is a teacher, coach, and supervisor for Easter Seals Foundation here in North Georgia.
Wow.
And I always tell people, Sandra, that when you adopt, I mean, this is kind of a no-brainer, but remember that your adopted kids, do not have your genes. And there's kind of tongue-in-cheek because one of the first things that the orphanage caregivers told my wife Lisa about Sarah, whose Indian name is Ashwini, which means star. But they said, remember, she's really stubborn. And so Lisa and I are very laid back. Sarah is driven. And we joke about that she wore out that timeout chair in the kitchen when she was little. Okay. And I could tell stories and we laugh about, but she also has been a blessing in our life. And both of the kids, they have faced some significant challenges along the way. Like any adoptive parent, we've been through some deep water and through the valleys and the mountaintops and in between, but we've been through the valleys. And so, you just hang on for the ride then and trust the Lord, because, when you adopt anytime, when you have a kid, whether it's birth biologically or not, you go into parenthood with your eyes wide open. But especially, I think in adoption, intercountry adoption, there's so many, issues there, language and culture and, identity. And so, we had a great village, great therapists. And so we're proud of both of our kids because of what they've overcome. And like I said, Michael and Sarah are the heartbeat of what I do. I probably would not be doing Adoptive Family Resources if it wasn't for them. And they're a blessing. They speak wisdom into what I do, give me good critical thinking, and so they're a blessing in that way, and they're a blessing in other ways. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that story. And, I think a lot of us, because I can completely relate with what I do today, I would not be doing if it wasn't for the fact that the Lord called us to adoption and placed these children into our family. My
Hmm.
whole life looks different, right? And I'm grateful, but, there are challenges along the way. We share about that very openly on the
Yeah.
show. And so were you, prior to becoming an adoptive dad, were you already working as a family therapist? Or did your professional work come after you became an adoptive dad and you're walking in this space of, children who've experienced trauma and adversity?
Right, correct. Yeah, I began my career, Sandra, in the counseling field in 1989.
Okay. Oh,
Uh,
wow. Way back in the
it's way
1900s.
back. I'm getting closer to dating my age here, but I won't reveal that. Um, but 1989, after I finished my clinical training at Emory University, I went into the counseling field, and it was primarily over the next, well, gosh, in a variety of venues, state mental health, private faith-based, private residential for about 8.5 years in California, but primarily with kids, children, and adolescents.
Mhm.
And did that from '89 until about 2015. And so I was in the middle of that when we adopted our kids. I was both when we adopted both Michael and Sarah. I was working for state mental health here in Georgia. So yeah, it's been since '89 with about a year gap in between, and then that kind of transitioned and morphed into Adoptive Family Resources in 2019. I tell parents I don't wear my therapy hat anymore, but I certainly use what I've learned in all the parent coaching I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So, as an adoptive dad and a professional who had worked with children and families, when your children came home from India, and the things that they were dealing with, the trauma and all of that, did anything surprise you? Were you prepared? Did you expect those hard challenges that came?
You know, Sandra, I can't think of anything specifically except for the mental and emotional energy
Mm,
that it took.
yeah.
Again, we had been married 13 years, doing our own thing, setting our own
Mhm.
schedule. And then, again, I think of these stories, the first or second Saturday that our son is home with us. My MO is to sleep in on Saturday morning. That's what I did for forever. And at 6:30 in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, that first Saturday, my little boy is standing next to me with a cowboy hat on and cap pistols in his holsters, pushing the bed, saying, "Daddy," pointing to the window, saying, "Son, son, the sun is up. It's time to get up." But that illustrates, but yeah, the emotional and physical. I mean, we were a lot younger then, but the emotional energy and sometimes the emotional drain.
Mhm.
Neither one of our kids ever had struggles with meltdowns and temper tantrums. I mean, that's not to say that there wasn't anger along the way, but just the emotional energy,
Mhm.
the radical change from 13 years of doing our own thing to now we have somebody here who's got to be the center of our attention.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
big that's a big shift. Yeah.
Hmm.
What about with we know that children who've come from hard places, as sometimes we say, I know you're a TBRI practitioner as well.
Hmm.
The behaviors are really symptoms of trauma and things that they
Yeah.
endure, maybe prenatal exposure, things like that. So,
Hmm.
did you understand that? Were there behaviors where you were like, I'm pretty sure I know where this comes from and what are we going to
Hmm.
do?
I would say kind of yes and no, Sandra, because I tell people I wish I would have known. Of course, TBRI did not exist back in the mid late
Right.
90s.
Right.
But if I would have known then what I know now, it would make my eyes more wider open to what their needs, because they did have residual to trauma, institutional orphanage living, things like food issues,
Mhm.
um, um, things like the transition from my son was in the orphanage 2.5 years, my daughter for a year and a half, but just the ingrained habits of institutional living that we had to be very patient with. And food issues. It wasn't a severe food issue thing, but it was enough to get our attention. I hope I'm answering that question right.
Yeah.
But just it was as much of a culture shock for us as it was for them, probably more for them.
Yeah.
I can remember our son early on, when he was still learning English, being upset about something and he could not express it in English at the time. And he got so mad because he was yelling. I don't know, he may have been cussing at us. I don't know. But he was so mad about something, mad at us, that he couldn't express it. And so we kind of had to navigate that. Thankfully, with children that young, they do pick up English really quick. And
Mhm.
both of our kids did. But there were those curves that got thrown at us, that we just kind of had to navigate and go, okay, this is because of where they've come from.
Mhm.
That's how we understood it then. This is because how they've come from. We didn't call it trauma, but it was. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What about attachment? How did that go?
Overall, I think I think it went pretty well. I think both of our children, Sandra, had attachment issues. And I
Mhm.
think just about every child who's adopted in our country has, if you put it on a scale of 1 to 10, there are issues there. For our son, it became a real struggle when he was in his mid-teens and
Mm.
just trying to figure out more who he was, and knowing, just being more aware. And of course, developmental psychologists tell us that usually kids, if you're parenting children of color, usually they begin to put the pieces together on that at about ages 7 and 8. And I think he did, but it really, we could see him struggle with that when he got to his mid-teens. So both of them, I think, I think particularly Michael, because he was older. He was 7 when we adopted him. Sarah was barely 4, and he struggled with that. I think particularly as he got into his teen years. But again, he worked through that, and we kind of came full circle on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there anything, because I just did a great interview with a gentleman, we talked about when white parents raise black children. Was there anything that you did to help your kids? Because being from India, they have a darker skin color. You and your wife
Yeah.
are white. So,
Yeah.
was there anything that you did to help them navigate that?
We did. And the cool thing here, Sandra, in Atlanta, we have a pretty large Indian population. And so, they have big India festivals. We did Indian food. We'd buy Indian movies. And so to try to expose them to that. But the interesting thing is, and again, another side story here, about 2 or 3 weeks after we brought Michael home to the U.S., my wife worked in downtown Atlanta. She had actually left her job there when we did the adoption, and she wanted to take Michael down to meet her coworkers. In the basement, or in the lobby of this big office building, there was an Indian man who ran a shop in there, kind of a convenience shop. And my wife Lisa knew him and wanted to introduce Michael to him. And so brought him over to this gentleman's shop. And the native language of Michael is called Marathi, which is on the western coast of India. This gentleman spoke Marathi from the same area.
Wow.
And so um, the gentleman asked Michael, "Oh, so you speak Marathi?" And Michael said, "No, I speak English." Now, I don't know, I forget already what your question was, but does that,
Yeah.
you know, so he wanted, we sensed in Michael, and again, we took him to a festival in India about a month or two after we adopted him, big festival. We're there for about 20 minutes, and Michael says, "Let's get out of here and go to Walmart." So we sensed there his discomfort. He was not comfortable
Yeah.
with being with white parents in that environment. So we
Oh,
kind of
okay.
had to back off on that. Now later on, as he grew older, it was different. But he could, I think both of those incidents were like, I want to fit in here, but yet
Yeah.
I don't want to fit in with other Indian people while my parents are there. And so we kind
Ah,
of had to navigate that. Sarah was different. Again, she was younger, a lot younger. And so, we kind of had to navigate those things, but, exposing them to the movies, to the festivals, we've done quite a bit of that. And, they've had doctors who have been from India. So, they've seen about how, in large part, the Indian population who has emigrated here has done really well in the medical field, in the IT field, and that's, I think, been a real encouragement to them.
Sandra Flach, host of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, and FASD educator Debbie Raymond invite you to join Hope for the FASD Journey, a virtual support community for parents and caregivers raising individuals with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, diagnosed or not. This faith-based support community meets online 3 times each month, features special VIP guests, and a private Facebook group for members only, which includes Soul Care Saturday video devotionals led by Sandra and Deb. Both Sandra and Deb are adoptive moms raising kids with FASD and facilitators of the Facets neurobehavioral model. For details and to register, visit justicefororphans.ny.org/hope-community. That's justicefororphans.ny.org/hope-community.
wow. I love to hear those stories because I know even though our kids that were adopted internationally came from Ukraine, we did some of those things where, I've got Christmas decorations that I bought in Ukraine. Every Easter I go to there's a Ukrainian deli about 30 minutes from where we live, and I get special food every year for Easter. And we've done, things like that but because I've got 4 kids that were siblings adopted from Ukraine, and our oldest son, and he was almost 10 when we brought him home, he only wanted to be American. It was like
Mm-hmm,
once he left Ukraine, he didn't want anything to do
mm-hmm.
with Ukraine. I mean, he does like the sunflower seeds. So there's the food, there's certain things he likes, but he really, like, he doesn't even, you can barely pick up a accent from him. And he was almost 10 when he came here. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then whereas his sister, who was a little bit younger, she was 7, she was like, loves everything Ukrainian. And like
Mm-hmm.
even still to this day, and she's 26, her birthday, I make borscht because that's what she wants. So she, loves her Ukrainian heritage. And then our 2 boys were much younger, so they were like, take it or leave
Yeah,
it. But
yeah.
just being sensitive to how they're feeling and what they want, it can be very individual.
Yeah, and I have found generally, along with that, Sandra, I have found generally, having worked with a lot of inter-country families, that typically, it's the girls who want to be more connected to their culture.
Yeah.
Generally, not. I mean, there are exceptions to that, but generally, the girls seem to want to have more of that connection, ongoing, the food, the culture, whatnot. And that's been my observation over the past many years.
Wow, fascinating. So let's
Mhm,
pivot here a little bit because you
mhm,
founded, I want to talk about your organization. You founded and you direct Adoptive Family Resources there in
mhm,
Georgia. What led you
mhm.
to start the organization?
Well, Sandra, as I mentioned earlier, I had worked in the mental health field for, 1989 to about 2015. And when we were out on the West Coast in California, I was an assistant director at a faith-based residential program for older adolescents, ages 16 to 21. A good number of our kids who came to that long-term program had come out of disrupted adoptions or were young adults who things blew up at home. And at any one time, and we were in a large program, at any one time, half of our census were kids who come out of adopted or disrupted adoptive homes. And that really caught my attention, especially because being an adoptive dad. Most of those kids were Eastern European. Probably 80-90% of them were Eastern European.
Probably FAS.
Yes, I mean, I could talk about data there, which you probably already know. And so that really kind of got the wheels turning in my head. We came back to Georgia here in 2016 because our kids were on the East Coast. We were on the West Coast. They wanted to be in Georgia. So we moved back, and I worked with a friend of mine in a local residential facility doing a special program there for a couple of years. But I thought, now's the time to do this. Lisa, my wife, had a good job with Chick-fil-A, could support me, still does, and I thought, this is what I want to do. I want to help specifically adoptive and foster families. I want to do not therapy, but I want to do training for adoption foster care professionals. I want to get specific on this. And so we became incorporated in January of 2019 and established a board. And, even though it's still a part-time gig, I don't know if it'll be more than that, but this is the most fun that I've ever had, Sandra. Going back to when we went to California in 2008, I think, this has been the most fun that I've ever had. You create something, this is a God thing. It belongs to the Lord, but you create it on your own. You can use your ideas. You're your own boss. And in 2019, I started a new career at age 60.
Wow.
And so we've been able to contract with several adoption foster care organizations in the Atlanta area. And actually, probably 80 to 90% of my work now is actually with foster families. It's kind of evolved that way. And also doing training for conferences, mainly in Georgia, parent conferences, professional conferences, of course, Christian Alliance for Orphans. Like yourself, I do workshops there. I've done workshops there for probably the past 5 years. And we love being members of that. We belong to an organization here in Georgia called Together Georgia, which is a network of about 70 faith-based and non-faith-based entities, residential foster care. And I do training at their professional conference. And so it's been, it's been a great ride. And, right now, most of my work is parent coaching. I do a lot of that virtually, primarily for organizations. I do a little bit of it by referrals that come to me from, anywhere from California to New Mexico to Florida. I've done, online coaching. People find out about me word of mouth through the website. And so that's really been the main thing I do is parent coaching, along with providing training on a variety of topics, which you can see on the website.
Yes, there's a whole bunch of them on your website that I saw, and you are a TBRI practitioner,
Yes.
so you bring all of the expertise on trauma and loss and grief and multiculturalism, attachment, all of those things. So, Mark, do you only serve families in Georgia? I mean, obviously the online stuff can be probably online, but what is can anybody listening who's listening today, how would they be able to tap into your resources?
Yeah, absolutely. Sandra, even though, the majority of my work is in Georgia, the parent coaching in particular, and I don't do a lot of that outside of Georgia, but it's mainly because I haven't really advertised that a lot. And I probably should, but I've done parent coaching with families in California. I can think of New Mexico, Texas, Florida, South Carolina. They hear about me when I do a training, because I always advertise the parent coaching when I do a training. I've done a handful of trainings out of state, but certainly with the parent coaching, which, here in the age of Zoom, I've never been a huge fan. I'm old school. I love doing in-person, face-to-face, but that's not the world we live in. And Zoom has been, it's effective. And so I do, a lot of parent coaching over Zoom, and can take those referrals from people outside of Georgia also. And they can just reach me. There's a contact box on the homepage of our website, adoptivefamilyresources.org, that send me an email. And the way that parent coaching works, real quickly, I do an initial 30 to 45-minute assessment session at no cost. And then the parent coaching itself we take it one session at a time, but it's 4 to 5 sessions. We do charge a fee, but being that I don't take insurance, I don't get into that mess. We never turn any parent away for financial reasons. That's the ministry part. Even though we don't advertise ourselves as a ministry, that's in essence of what we are. And so for families in need, we will never deny family services for financial reasons. We have means to subsidize that, and I want to emphasize that, and so we don't advertise our fees on the website because we want to encourage people to reach out. We will work with you so that's not a burden.
Wow, I love that. So your website is adoptivefamilyresources.org.
Correct.
Correct. And we will put a link in the show notes, of course, so that listeners can go there and connect with you if they are interested in that, and especially in the coaching, because that is something anybody from anywhere can. And when you say referral, can it be just as simple as a family emails you or contacts you
Yes.
through the website and says, we need coaching help?
Yes.
Okay.
Most families self-refer if it's independent.
Okay.
Periodically, I'll get a referral from a caseworker, maybe CPS caseworker. I've got a referral just a couple of weeks ago from a friend of mine who's a licensed therapist, who is working with the child but wants somebody to do some specific TBRI oriented coaching for the parents, and so we work in tandem.
Great. That is wonderful. I love that. And families need that kind of support, and because I do FASD coaching with
Mhm.
with parents, and but that one-on-one, very sort of custom for your family coaching is so
Mhm.
helpful and so vital. So that is a wonderful resource. Um so let's see. Let's see. I wanted to get to a little bit of the FASD stuff because we first connected when you took one of my online
Right.
workshops, that deep
Right.
dive into FASD using the
Mhm.
facets approach. How did that workshop impact you in learning about FASD?
Oh my gosh, Sandra, I think as I've shared with you before, this has absolutely rocked my world. Backing up a little bit, I first learned about FASD from a family in my church who have an adopted son. They adopted him when he was about 18 months. He's now 21. He is delightful, but he's full-blown FASD. And I've learned from them in discussions with them. And then, took about a 6-hour course with Barb Clark back in late 2024. And that really got the wheels turning. And then when I did the 18 or 20-hour training with you, it was like, oh my gosh. I will tell you this, and I think listeners take note of this. As a professional for 37 years, nothing, nothing has impacted me as a professional like FASD
Mm,
because it is so epidemic. I
yeah.
think back now, again, I think back to the 90s about foster and adopted kids I worked with, and I go, you know what? This was going on then.
Hmm.
Maybe not as much as now, but this was going on then. And like you mentioned, the kids from Eastern Europe that I worked with in California, I think, man, absolutely, absolutely. And so this has, and I told my board when we met back in May at our board meeting, I said, I really see us taking a new and major trajectory here with Adoptive Family Resources, not getting away from parent coaching, not getting away from the training on trauma, but combined with what I've learned from TBRI, which was another
Yes.
huge deal, becoming a TBRI practitioner. But from what I am learning, I've told my board and I've told people that I've trained, I said, I am not an expert yet in FASD, but by golly, I'm going to become one. And I am in that process.
Yeah.
I am soaking this stuff up, looking at stuff on your website, reading Barb Clark's book, reading the book by Diane Malbin, Trying
Yes.
Differently Rather Than Harder. It has rocked my world. And I was looking, after 7 years of Adoptive Family Resources, I was looking for a new challenge. Again, not throwing away the old challenges, but I just felt I was feeling a little bit stagnant and needing an additional challenge. And I'm telling you, this is it. Um,
Mm,
you know, um, it's this is oh my gosh, it's like layers of an onion, you
yeah.
know.
Oh,
You
yeah.
keep learning. And I've trained in the past year, I've trained 5 different agencies, either professionals or the foster parents on FASD. And I've gotten
Wonderful.
great feedback. I'm going to be doing another one here in Georgia for a parent adoptive foster parents conference in September. Um, and I've gotten really great feedback because, I've had a couple of instances when I'm doing this. I've had parents say, "Oh my gosh, this is my kid.
Yes.
I thought he was on the autism spectrum, and he may be. He may
Mhm.
be. And
Yeah.
let me make that clear. My kid's diagnosed ADHD out the wazoo or ODD, but oh my gosh, you're describing my kid here."
Yeah.
And so I've been able to point several families to Emory University. They've changed the name now, but it's called the Early Childhood and Substance Abuse Neurodevelopmental Clinic. But Emory University here is actually one of the major centers in the States that does diagnostics for fetal alcohol. And I pointed people to them to get on the referral list. They do, the full battery of testing, DNA, brain scans, everything. And so, yeah, it is absolutely opened a huge new door for the organization to pursue and to get the word out there, because this truly is, as I think, I don't know where this originated from, whether it was maybe you or Barb Clark or somebody who said it's the invisible disability,
Yeah.
and it really is.
It is.
I was talking with a mom the other night who suspects FASD in her child. It took her child to the pediatrician. The pediatrician says, "Well, he doesn't have the facial markers, so he's not on the spectrum." Well, that's not true. That's
That's
only
true.
eight.
Yeah.
That's only 8 to 10% of the kids are had the facial markers. And so I have learned that good pediatricians are very uninformed
Yeah.
about this, because I told mom that's not necessarily true.
Right.
The research is solid on this. Only 8 to 10% of kids have those facial markers, but the spectrum is wide. Anyhow, I could talk all day about this, but this
Me
is
too, as you
really
know. Yeah.
it's really lit my fuse. And yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm thrilled that you joined FASD United as an
Oh
affiliate.
yeah.
Yeah. That is
Hmm.
that is great. And I know that's sometimes it is an invisible disability, and it's so in, incredibly eye-opening when we realize how many professionals, doctors and such, don't really know about it. And I've interviewed a couple of doctors who now specialize in FASD, fetal
Hmm.
alcohol spectrum disorders, and they both, when I've asked them like why is it so hard to get a diagnosis? Why? And they both basically said we didn't learn this in medical school. It's
Correct.
maybe a paragraph in a medical book, maybe five
Hmm.
minutes in a lecture. And locally here in upstate New York where I am, I just this spring had the opportunity to table two conferences, and I was very strategic. It was the New York State Mental Health Counselors Association. So all of these mental health counselors and clinicians from around the state of New York and college students about to graduate to be mental health clinicians,
Hmm.
so they would be walking by our booth, and I would, you make eye contact, you chat, and we have all of our resources and posters and things, and they're looking, and I would ask, "Are you familiar with FASD?" And almost everybody would be like, "No." And then when I would say,
Hmm.
"Well, it's fetal alcohol," and they're like, "Oh yeah, I know a little bit about fetal alcohol syndrome." But then
Hmm.
as we begin to say, well, did you know that 1 in 20 people in the United States are affected? Did you know it was the leading cause of developmental and learning disabilities worldwide? And
Yes.
their minds are blown because they really don't know anything about it, and they just have heard a
Hmm.
little tiny bit. Maybe they've heard of fetal alcohol syndrome is a thing, and that's all they know. They
Yeah.
really don't know anything from the last even 20 years of research. And likewise, the other conference I attended and had a table at here was the New York State Perinatal Association's
Hmm.
annual conference. So that's, from before birth to I think age 5 maybe.
Hmm.
And same thing. People didn't know,
Hmm.
and college students would come by and they're like, "Oh, well, we didn't learn about this." And they're
Hmm.
studying to become social workers or psychologists, and it is like right under everybody's nose and nobody
Yeah.
knows, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Exactly.
parents,
And
I
yeah.
find, have to become the experts
Yeah.
because because we can't rely on professionals, but thankfully there are more professionals like yourself who are
Mhm.
learning and who are soaking it all up and then spreading the word and supporting families. It's so important.
Yeah, it really is. And I, just recently learned that, historically, it actually is a fairly, well, 1973. It's a fairly recent
Yeah.
diagnosis. I mean, when you think about autism, I think the official diagnosis with autism was like back in the 40s or 50s, but 1973, and that's again, yeah, that's over 50 years ago, but that's kind of recent history.
Yeah.
And this is why I'm so thankful for organizations like FASD United. They're doing such a great job with lobbying and
Yes.
funding research. And but I'm actually kind of shocked that the knowledge of FASD is not as well known. And I've met some great parent experts. I've met several of them, more than several, who really have done their research and are educating their pediatricians if the pediatricians will listen.
Yeah.
And you're right. I was when I was talking with a friend up in South Carolina who has her daughter who is 7, full blown on the spectrum, FASD, who has a pediatrician who's really on top of things. But part of that came from this parent educating that pediatrician,
Yeah.
bringing awareness, in a persistent but tactful way. You know,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
It's so important. So we encourage our listeners to get that training. The Trying Differently Rather Than Harder book is a great place to start. The newest version is the dark purple version. It's been put out by the
Right.
folks at Facets. You can get it on Amazon. It's that, and it's not just FASD, but all brain-based differences. But a lot of times it's FASD, and we don't know,
Yeah.
because there's all those other, like you mentioned, there's almost always the ADHD diagnosis. There
Hmm.
could be an autism diagnosis. It's like the alphabet soup of all the different acronyms,
Hmm.
which may or may not be accurate, but it's likely that it all comes under that umbrella of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. And in this space of adoption and foster care, we don't even always know the history. We don't always find out. But when you start understanding the symptoms, it becomes oftentimes very apparent. So thank you
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
diving into it and for learning and for continuing to spread the word and being so involved and training
Hmm.
families and professionals. I'm sure that you're using it in your parent coaching. Have you found in your
Absolutely.
coaching that you're starting to realize, oh, this could really be
Mhm.
FASD?
Oh, yes, Sandra. Again, going back to the studies, we're looking now at between 70 and 80% of kids coming into the foster care system somehow being affected, not necessarily the full-blown facial marker FASD, but being affected. And
Right.
and looking at the frequency, again, looking at the data of the number of women who drank much more during COVID, or
Hmm.
who drink socially without knowing that they're pregnant.
Right.
And so just looking at the data. And so when I get a referral from one of the foster care organizations, the first thing we do is we staff that. I staff that with the caseworker and the caseworker coordinator. And often, and of course, with CPS and what we call DFACS here in Georgia, the history on so many of these kids is very spotty because they've been bounced around from pillar to post, different placements with families, and so the information gets lost, particularly about the biological parents, if in fact there is any, or sometimes that information is not divulged by CPS.
Right.
When kind of the antenna go up in my mind about this, I will ask the caseworker, do you have any knowledge, based on what you're telling me, if this child was exposed particularly to alcohol in utero? And a lot of times they'll know more about drugs, the meth and that. But I think, and this is not, I don't have any solid research behind this, but my gut tells me that at least 50% of the time, that if a biological mom is using meth or cocaine, they're using the alcohol too, because they're using the stimulant drugs to prop them up, and alcohol is a depressant. They're using the alcohol to bring them down, and that's especially if you have an underlying mental illness, like mood disorders or bipolar. They're using the drugs to bring them up the scale, the meth and the cocaine and the crack, but they're using the alcohol to bring them down. Okay.
Mm.
And so, but I will ask parents often too, and it's not like I'm looking for FASD under every rock. That is not true. But it has heightened my awareness because 70 to 80% of kids have been affected either mildly or profoundly because of how much alcohol a lot of these biological moms. And again, we're hearing. I can't go off on this tangent, but we're hearing some research now out of Georgetown University about the dad's contribution
Yeah.
to DNA. Not that the dad is the primary causal factor, but certainly can be a contributing factor.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Genetics. Yeah. Epigenetics. So
Epigenetics, right. That was the word I was looking for.
yeah. So, yes, so prevalent. It's so many places, and we're not looking under every rock, but it's almost like it's almost always on top of the rock if you look, right?
Yeah.
So it's incredible. So I appreciate the work that you are doing, Mark, through Adoptive Family Resources on the FASD front as well. I want to get to the scripture verse because you chose the verse I read today. I'll read it again. I am the Lord, the God of all mankind. Is anything too hard for me? So, what does Jeremiah 32:27 mean to you?
Mm-hmm. Well, let me say where that evolved from, Sandra. That actually evolved from another one of my life verses, if you will, Genesis 18:14, when the angel came to Abraham and Sarah and said, you're going to have a baby at age 90. And Sarah laughed, and the angel of the Lord said, why do you laugh? Is anything too hard? And so, but that led me to Jeremiah. Somehow, I don't know how I got to Jeremiah, which is kind of a ditto of that. In context, he's talking with the Israelites there in captivity, I think, but he's telling them, I am the Lord of all mankind. Nothing is too difficult. It's more of a definite statement there in Jeremiah. And so I took that as our target verse for Adoptive Family Resources. When I send out our newsletter email to our supporters, that verse is on every email, update newsletter. But that it just tells me what it says. Nothing is too difficult, and that has been proven time and again with Adoptive Family Resources. I had no clue how to start a nonprofit, but I did it, with a lot of help from a lot of people. But we started the nonprofit. Back in January of 2025, my goal, I told my board, I would like us to pray for God to open a God-sized door for us. And that door was just, in 25 just blew us away. And then comes the FAD knowledge, that's Jeremiah 32:27. Nothing is too difficult for me. The sky is the limit, and so I just keep walking through the open doors, nothing is too difficult. Nothing is too difficult. I have a good friend. She's not even a believer. She's a colleague of mine in the adoption field, and she's 90 years old, and she is a force of nature. We do some work together, actually. And she's an adoptive parent, adult kids from India. But she has a quote, everything is impossible until somebody does it. That's Jeremiah 32:27. Everything is impossible until somebody does it, until somebody finds a way to do it.
Yeah.
And so that's our polar star verse, Jeremiah 32:27.
Yeah. Everything's impossible until God decides he wants it done, right?
Yeah.
And then it gets done. So
It's done.
I love that. Love that. So and for our families, right? For nothing is impossible for God when it comes to our kids, our families, our ministries, and just keeping our eyes on him and trusting him. So as we wrap up our conversation today, Mark, would you share some words of encouragement with our foster and adoptive parents who are listening today?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Folks, don't give up. It's really hard, it's really hard. And listen, this is my own learned life experience. It's really hard to see progress when you're in the trenches. And as adoptive and foster parents, we're in the trenches a lot, a lot of times more than we want to be. It's hard to see things objectively. We see things more subjectively, especially on our hard days, because we're going according to a lot more according to emotion. And that's, that's not a sin. That's just who we are as human beings. But know that you are doing better than you think you are. And you're probably thinking, yeah, Mark, easy for you to say, you don't know me, you're not in my shoes, and I'm not. But I've got some lived experience because I've gotten feedback from my mentors, from our village that, over the time, we've done a better job. And that is even when the worst case scenario, when you have to maybe disrupt that foster care placement, that may be even when your adopted child has to go into a residential facility for a period of time. Okay. We do our best, and you are doing better than you think you are. Okay. The Lord sees this objectively a lot more than we do. Okay. But what you are doing is James 1:27 work. And most of you know that scripture. This is what pure religion is, James says, to take care of widows, but I emphasize orphans, in their need, in their despair. Okay. And I like to paraphrase this in my own paraphrase. James is saying there, folks, this is as pure as it gets. This is as pure as a religious act can get. It is taking care, ministering to widows and orphans. And just to remember this in closing, and this was kind of a tough thing for me to kind of internalize, but I told a couple of parents this 2 nights ago in parent coaching. The Lord loves your kid more than you do.
Yeah.
Now you think about this. We would take a bullet for our kids. We would step in front. We would do this, but the Lord, we love our kids, and we can't wrap our brain around this, but it's true. The Lord loves our kids more than we do, despite of how deep those trenches are that you're going through. Okay, they're in the Lord's hands. Okay, and we have to, for a person like me who's a control freak, that's kind of hard, but it's true. The Lord loves our kids more than we do, and embrace that. Okay, embrace that. Trust God for that. It was hard for me to absorb that when my mentor told me that about a year ago. But it's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah. No matter how old our kids are.
Yes.
Right? It's trusting them to the Lord, right?
Yeah.
Because he loves them more than we do.
Yes.
Loves them more than we could possibly ever knew them. He knew them before we knew them.
Absolutely. Psalm 139.
Yeah. Love that. So, Mark, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today and for the great work that you are doing to serve families through Adoptive Family Resources there in Georgia and beyond. Again, we will post a link in the show notes so that our listeners can find you and your organization easily enough. And I get to see you in person again in September at CAFO.
So excited about that.
Yeah, me too. Looking forward to it. So thanks again for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. God bless, Sandra.
Thank you. You too. And as always, thank you for listening to the adoption and foster care journey today. I hope you were encouraged by my conversation with Dr. Mark Andrews. Be sure to check out his website at adoptivefamilyresources.org. And of course, I am here to serve you and provide you with resources for your adoption and foster care journey as well. In addition to this podcast, which is a vital resource, I hope you think, we have in-person and online workshops on trauma and on FASD and brain-based differences. And I also offer one-on-one parent coaching on the topic of FASD. So if you're parenting a kiddo who you suspect was prenatally exposed to alcohol, or maybe whether they're diagnosed or not, and you want some advice and guidance and support, you want to learn some things and you want to get some new tools in your tool belt, the one-on-one parent coaching is a great way to get that in. And of course, we have my favorite, the Hope for the FASD Journey online support group. We meet the first 3 Tuesday nights of each month via Zoom. And we have parents experts from all across the country who are involved in that. And some make all 3 meetings every month, and some, make a meeting here and there. And that's totally great. We have a private Facebook group where we stay connected. And we are getting to host our very first retreat for the moms who are part of the support group. So stay tuned to our social media, the Adoption and Foster Care Journey social media pages, because in July, towards the end of the month, we'll be posting pictures from the retreat. You'll get to see what that was like. I'm super excited to I think we're bringing about 13 moms together out of our group who are making the trip to the Adirondack Mountains of upstate New York for some rest and filling and just renewal. So we're going to have a time of that, because especially when you're parenting kiddos with FASD, you need rest and renewal. and we're going to get that there. So to learn all about our resources, and don't forget, in September, we have that 3-hour workshop called Wired Differently that's going to be offered. So you can check out everything at justicefororphansny.org. Just click on Adoption and Foster Care Journey on the homepage. There's a link in the show notes to make it easy. And please subscribe to this podcast. Leave a review if you're listening on Apple or on Podbeam. Wherever you can leave a review. Sometimes you're able to do that. And subscribe. Tell your fellow fostering and adopting friends about this podcast so that they can listen and be encouraged too. We do have a YouTube channel. Justice for Orphans has a YouTube channel. So all of the video versions of our podcasts are posted on the YouTube channel. So you can go there if you would like to watch, your podcasts, right? Again, we have social media pages for the Adoption and Foster Care Journey on Instagram and Facebook. So check those out and follow us there. And again, as we come to the end, I am so grateful that you spent your valuable time with me today. I am thrilled to have you along for the journey.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, brought to you by Justice for Orphans. We hope you were encouraged today. Please be sure to subscribe to this podcast and leave a review, and share it with your fellow foster and adoptive parent friends so they can be encouraged too. Be sure to find and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Justice for Orphans, and check out our website for vital resources at justicefororphansny.org.